Hello and welcome to Backyard History Battles. Today we're going to be discussing footwear of the American Civil War. The first shoe I'm going to talk about was the most common and made by the millions throughout the duration of the American Civil War. It is the brogan, also known as the Jefferson bootie, as Thomas Jefferson first made this style of lace-up shoe popular in the United States. These shoes are made of 100% leather, leather uppers, leather laces, and even a leather sole. Early in the war, it was a sewn sole, whereas mid to late war they went to using pegs to fasten the sole together. It cost roughly $1.25 to $1.30 to use pegs, whereas $1.90 to sew the sole. The Army needed a way to cut costs, and that's just how they did it. According to the revised Army regulations of 1863, an infantryman was allowed 4 pairs of booties annually. As for a cavalry soldier, they were allowed 1 pair of boots and 2 pairs of booties every year that they served. The brogan was very simplistic in design, and it wore out quickly. But it was imperative that the Army was able to supply their troops with these shoes, though the Confederacy was much less fortunate. Speaking of Confederate footwear, what would the rebel soldier wear on his feet? Well, a lot of times, as you would suspect, they would raid Union depots to get the M1851 brogan. They wore them and used them to great effect. But a lot of times, even us reenactors don't even think about civilian shoes. A lot of Confederates wore civilian shoes or British import shoes, whatever they really could get their hands on. There was a bit more variety in the Confederate Army as far as their footwear. As I mentioned, I would talk about a couple examples of shoes. Well, I talked about the brogan, and now I wanted to talk about these. These are camp shoes, often worn by officers or soldiers seeking the breathability of a canvas shoe. These aren't a military shoe, they're a civilian shoe, and they were worn for sports like baseball. These are like your modern day Converse. They weren't very common during the Civil War, but they do show up in several photographs. As the name would suggest, these shoes are typically worn whilst in camp. As much as I love camp shoes, they should really be worn in pretty limited numbers in the reenacting hobby. Also, I've been kind of told they look like clown shoes, the likes of which Ronald McDonald would wear. As far as the stovepipe boot goes, they were more commonly worn by cavalry troopers and artillerymen. These were more costly to make and required more leather to produce as compared to the bootie. These were adopted in 1851 for artillery drivers. That's how they got the name artillery driver's boot. It later became the standard for cavalrymen and artillerymen alike, and also very popular even with infantrymen. What about them tall knee-high boots that raise above the knee, have the big flap, that are so tall that they almost eliminate the necessity for pants? That's how tall they are. Well, were they common? No. Did they exist? Yeah, I mean there's photos of them. But it seems to me that reenactors really love these boots. But really, it'd be more common for you to see a mounted soldier wearing booties, or obviously the M1851 artillery driver's boot, than you would these tall, goofy, very Hollywood style boots. Don't get me wrong, once again, they did exist and there are photos, so before you try to say, oh well, I've seen photos, yeah, but they just weren't super common. Something I want to address is a lot of reenactors like to tuck their pants into their boots, and where this was practiced during the Civil War, there was a lot of photos of soldiers just wearing their pants untucked, draped over their artillery boot. That's just something to think about. Maybe consider why it is that you would rather tuck them in or maybe not tuck them in. Whatever it is, just kind of be more conscious about why you're doing it or why you're not. Does it fit your impression? Are you doing it just because it looks cool? I know Stephen Dawkes of the 11th Ohio Cavalry has kind of touched up on this topic, or just, you know, similar things to that, like why are you doing it? What's NUG? Normal, usual, general. But it is a fair point, and I like to look personally of the trousers over the tall boot. I think it just looks nice. As for the booty wearer, There's not a whole lot that you could get wrong. You can cuff your trousers. You could tuck your trousers into your socks. Once again, same thing. Kind of think about why it is you're doing that. Does it better your impression? Is there a good reason for why you're doing it? That's just something to think about. Also, the socks that you wear is a pretty important detail. Not only will they make wearing your brogans or your boots a lot more comfortable when you're wearing a proper pair of wool socks, or even, you know, nice pair of cotton socks for that matter. Spectators will probably see your socks at some point, but if you're sitting at camp and maybe you put your knee over your other knee or whatever it is, or your pants are shorter, there's a chance that they could see your socks, and if they see white Nike socks, they're probably not gonna be too impressed. As for reenacting, I think it is best to try to invest in a quality pair of brogans. They will last you a lot longer, and they just look a lot better. I've seen some pretty rough, cheap brogans that they don't cut it. And really, if you're in the hobby for any number of years, at least for me, the cheap brogans just wear out almost every season, and I'm constantly buying a new pair. So it just made sense to buy a quality pair, and we're gonna talk about where you can find some quality boots.
So where can you find quality booties, or any kind of Civil War footwear for that matter? The first place I would recommend for brogans is South Union Mills. These are probably the most affordable quality boots that look proper and should last you many seasons. At $180, they are worth the investment. South Union Mills also carries several other styles of footwear, including camp shoes and artillery boots. Another place to look is the Depot Historic. They carry very nicely detailed boots, once again having a variety to choose from. The Depot's boots are a bit pricier than South Union Mills, though they carry a nice civilian selection. The Depot also carries a fine pair of British import shoes labeled as the Northampton Brogan. As I had mentioned, these were worn by Confederate soldiers, and these brogans are a direct copy of a pair worn by such. One place you can look if you're wanting artillery boots is Veteran Arms. Most of their reenacting gear is pretty mainstream, although from looking at their M1851 artillery boots, they seem to be well constructed and have the right appearance. They are more affordable than most boots of this style that I have seen. Finally, Missouri Boot and Shoe is known for quality leather goods, specializing in footwear and accoutrements. They have been serving reenactors in the hobby for many years and have some of the finest products. They will custom make your footwear upon ordering. Their standard brogans are over $200, making them the most expensive option. One thing to keep in mind is the waiting time for handcrafting and delivering your purchase may be a long one.
Once again, I want to thank you all for watching. This has been an installment on the Reenactor's Guide. I hope that you were able to find something helpful in this video, or maybe you found a new place to buy your next pair of brogans. And with that being said, I hope to see you back here on Backyard History Battles.